Hey guys. Okay, so today we're going to answer the question, how do you confirm whether a use or work was lawfully established? Why? Well, knowledgeable people, and I do emphasize the word knowledgeable people here, know that when you go to purchase like a commercial property or a house that's been converted to dual occupancy, you need to check that it was lawfully established and that it can continue to operate in that way. You can't assume just because it's been that way for like 30 or 40 years that it's allowed to be there in the first instance. However, more importantly, I expect this question is going to come up more and more frequently in the weeks and months to come as knowledgeable, and again, I emphasize that word knowledgeable, people go to do flood recovery work or rebuilding sort of work. Because the thing is, and most people do not realize this, if you intend to draw on the exemption under the current City Plan 2014 to rebuild like for like, you need to first establish that the work was lawfully created in the first instance. And there's a lot of people out there that just go, oh, but the insurance company is paying for it, so that must mean it's okay. Yeah, I hate to break it to you. There's a little bit more to it. So what do you need to know? People rather naively, let's just say, often think that they can just pick up the phone to council and council will solve all their problems. Council will be like, oh, yep, I've got all the answers here. It was created in this day. Here's the approval. Here's when it was finished, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, I hate to say it. Now, I was thinking about this morning and I was like, you know what? I'm going to liken this to a car. People look at council and they kind of put them up on this godlike pedestal. They kind of treat them like a Ferrari. On the outside, yeah, they definitely look like a Ferrari. However, on the inside, they're rocking like a 30-year-old Toyota engine. And I don't mean that to come across in a disrespectful way. It's actually just a reflection of the scenario or the situation. It's a reflection of what we as society have given council to work with over time. Back in the day, our expectations of what we wanted in terms of data collection, all of that sort of stuff, was totally different. Our population was so much smaller and we didn't see a need for the data collection process. These days though, especially post-COVID, there is a hunger, a thirst for data and for information, and people's expectations are totally different. So yeah, when it comes to council, they may look flashy on the outside and you may think they've got all this information at their fingertips, but the reality is we as ratepayers have said to them, yeah, you don't need to be the fastest car around the track. You only need to get around the track. And yeah, I'm not going to give you $1 million budget. I'm only going to give you a $100 budget because that's the value that I place on this sort of process. So that heavily has influenced the amount of information council has collected, retained, etc., over time. Now, I won't talk in detail a bit more detail about how our records have evolved over time, so you sort of have an understanding or appreciation as to why I say that. So first things first, you need to understand the first date that we, in really simple, crude terms, started keeping records was back in 1904. So that's when we first started the building registers. The building registers were chronological records. So each year we had a new book, and within that book it just listed what work was occurring across the city. So as you can imagine, if you weren't to actually access that information and work out when something was done on a site, you first got to know what year to look at. Most of the time, you're not going to have access to that information, so it's going to be a painful process. And then if you actually, by some miracle, happen to find the right book and find the record, it's probably just going to be a small little note. I say probably because I personally have never bothered to look into that sort of stuff. I've always just put it in the too hard basket, but I assume, based on what I've heard over the years, that the information that's recorded in those books is really light on. Now, the other thing you need to keep in mind is back then in 1904 through to 1925, Brisbane City was teeny tiny. It didn't include things like the town of Toowong. Like, that blows my mind. Toowong, 5 minutes from the CBD, like that's inner city suburbs. But back then, that wasn't even part of our city. So yeah, the areas that the registered covered, or registers, if I get my words out, covered were really small. Fast forward to 1925, we amalgamated with like the city of South Brisbane, whoa, and town of Toowong and all those areas, and suddenly the amount of information that was going into these books increased. Hey, great. Yeah, still got to know what year to look at, and you're still only going to get a piddly little record at the end of the day. Fast forward, well no, actually I should mention, we also started in 1911 the process of doing the detail plans, which is the surveys of all the houses across the city in preparation for laying the sewer lines, but that process ran right up until the 70s, so it was a very long and painful process, but I'll come back to that in a second. Next, you fast forward to 1945, I think it was like November 1945, and we moved to the building card system. Game changer. Like, instead of having one book for each year and everything across the city going into that one book, it was individual cards for each property. Problem is the information was still light on, like it was little notes here and there, and often it's illegible. Like I'll go back in this video and insert a screenshot later, an image of a building card, just to show you what I'm talking about. Most of the time though, you either cannot read a single thing on that page because you have to have a really good handwriting skills, sort of interpretation skills, or you can only pick out little words. So you might look at it and go, okay, I can see new, I can see dwelling, I can see fire. So I'm going to assume there was a fire and they built a new dwelling, and I can see 1955 something. Okay, so probably in the 50s it burnt down, blah, blah. You could start to piece some things together, but they're still really light on. Like there's not a lot of information in that sort of stuff. Then you fast forward to, I think it was like 1984, and we started to move to more a project-based system. So I think back to my days when I started in council, we used to have manila folders, A4 manila folders, and we kept the key information or key data for that project on that folder. So it might be revised plans as they were submitted to council, or you might put file notes of meetings that you had with the applicant, all that sort of stuff. So it was definitely a massive, massive step up from the individual property cards with single notations to files, but it still doesn't have a lot of information. Then you fast forward and we come to like 2004, and council started recording the information on the data electronically. Well, they recorded a little bit earlier than that, but they made it publicly accessible, and we have systems like Development I created. Problem with Development I, unfortunately, it's going through some growing pains, let's just say. Council hasn't turned on all of the data or the access to all of the data and all the information because they're worried it's going to explode and crumble on them. So they're basically opening up layers of information bit by bit as the system proves that it can handle it. So we don't have ready access to everything still, but if again you go back to the registers, it is a world, it's a totally different world that we're operating in now compared to back then. So yeah, what you can see here is again, massive progression over time from single books for single years for entire cities, right through to individual electronically accessible project files for each and every project that's done. Also, massive step up in terms of the quality of information required. So I look back, my dad often jokes when he renovated our house, I think before we were born or just after we were born, my sisters and I, he walked into council with a hand-drawn sketch, showed it to the building officer across the counter, and the building officer went, yeah, okay, stamp, sent it off. These days though, like we have to have material notations on every elevation, height lines on every elevation. We have to have demolition plans, all of that sort of stuff, really, really technical information. So yeah, our expectations have changed over time, and therefore the amount of information we're collecting has now changed. And I think COVID just fast-tracked that. Like pre-COVID, all you had to do was satisfy council, you had to make sure council could read your plans. Now you've got to make sure the neighbours and everyone else, the public, can understand and interpret the information because society is expecting that from council. Now that I've got that out of the way, now we've talked about, or I've given you some insight into how our record keeping has changed over time, we need to talk about external, if I can words out, influences. I need a coffee, I haven't had one this morning. External influences like the 1974 flood. That wiped out a bucket load of our records. We lost a lot of our paper records and our data on these sites. Detailed plans. So back in the post-World War II era, we were really, really light and limited, I was about to say light on or limited to money. So therefore we didn't have a lot of council employees. Therefore, the council employees were really stretched in terms of their time. Therefore, they cut corners in terms of their record keeping. So when it came to the building cards, they would actually reduce the amount of data they were recording on these things. Like I've heard sometimes you had completion dates on houses on these cards. Most of the time you didn't because the officers didn't have the time, the resources to be able to record that information. Or another example, the detailed plans. I've been told when you get to the 1960s, aerial photos came in. So naturally the surveyors were like, yeah, I'm not going to go to site. I'm just going to outline based on what I can see on that aerial photo. Much, much more efficient use of resources. Problem is when you're working off an aerial photo, you don't know where the verandas are, you don't know where the stairs are. So the quality of data kept in these records is significantly reduced. So yeah, external influences have over time changed the level of information and the quality of information that we have access to. So you're naturally then going to go, okay, well, if council doesn't have the answer, how do we work it out? What do we do? Well, the next thing as private planners that we need to do is go back and work out, did you actually need town planning approval under the planning scheme or the rule book that was in play at that point in time? Keeping in mind that rules, just like the data collection, rules have evolved and increased and intensified over time. I personally think 1987 was a bit of a turning point. Prior to 1987, yeah, chances are you probably didn't need town planning approval. Post 1987, even now, 2014, yeah, you're probably going to need town planning approval. I mean, the town planning industry in Brisbane, it's only been going for like 20, 30 years, really. It's a real baby sort of industry. It's not something that's been around forever and a day, and that's a reflection of how the planning rules and regulations have intensified over time. Back then, we didn't need town planners because there was no rules to enforce. Now, you need town planners. So yeah, you need to go back and go through those books. Now, off the top of my head, I think there's 5 different planning schemes we've had as a city: 1965, 78, 87, 2000 and 2014. Now you're probably thinking pretty easy. Just go back and open the rule book, look at it. Right, nothing much to it. Yeah, I like to think of planning schemes like languages. So for me, English, it's my native language. It's what I speak every single day. So it's the same as City Plan 2014. It's a document that I'm operating in and out of every single day. So 99% of the time, when you throw an English word at me, I'm going to know what it means. Sure, there's a couple of words I'm going to be like, yeah, I kind of need to Google that, or well, let's have a look at what that actually means. Same thing with City Plan 2014. You give me a high rise in the CBD, I'm not going to really know that sort of stuff. That's not what we work, the space that we sort of work in. So it's not something I'm going to know off my top of my head, but you give me enough time, I'll use my resources to work it out. So that's City Plan 2014. Go back to City Plan 2000, I started my career under 2000. So under that planning scheme, that document. I liken this to like a language that you learnt in high school. So for me, I learnt Japanese and German. So I can readily just regurgitate certain words. Like I go, arigatou gozaimasu, or konnichiwa, or I can just throw those phrases, or my nama is Peter. I can throw those sort of words at you. But you ask me to put sentences together, and I'm like, yeah, I don't remember that. However, you give me a bit of exposure back to the language. So you drop me in the middle of Japan, or you give me a podcast to listen to for an hour, and I'll start to remember little things. And I'll be like, oh, that's right, that's how you count to 10. And oh, that's right, that's how you say that phrase. Same thing with City Plan 2000. You dump me back in that rule book, I can instantly go, I know where the exemptions are. I know what the definition was for that. But oh, the tables of assessment, where were they? Oh, that's right, you had to do this. But over time, I'll be putting those puzzle pieces back together and going, that's right, I remember, this was my jam, this is what I did. So yeah, I can work it out. However, you give me like the 1987 town plan, I've never worked under that. So it's kind of like a language I've never been exposed to or never learnt before. So let's use Hungarian, for example. It's not a language, like you could be speaking Hungarian to me and I'd be like, is it Russian? Is it Fijian? Is it, I don't know what it is. But I have people in my network that I can reach out to interpret that. So again, coming back to the language analogy, my high school, the friend that I grew up next to when I was in primary school, her mum grew up in Hungary. So I could reach out to her and be like, so can you translate this for me? Same thing. I have a couple of people in my network I can reach out to if I need to interpretate. Again, I need that coffee. Interpretate the 1987 town plan. However, if you take me back to like the 1965 one, yeah, I'm stuck. I liken that to like a really remote Aboriginal language, like something that's spoken in an area that's 10 hours drive from Brisbane, something that's spoken by a group of people who's young, and like the kids and that sort of younger generations have not learnt the language, where they've moved off to the cities. And the only people left are like 2 95-year-old elders who, yeah, they're the only ones that speak that language now. So they're people that you're like, okay, it's a very, very, very small pool. And because of their age, you're not necessarily going to trust the, not reputation, what's the word I'm going for? The quality, the accuracy. You're not necessarily going to trust the accuracy of what they're telling you. Exactly the same with the 1965 town plan for the city of Brisbane, or whatever it was called. I'm losing my words here. But basically, if I tried, I could probably find someone through my extended network. It'd take a long time. Probably find someone who had a working knowledge of that book at some stage. I could probably ask them, but I don't know if I'd necessarily trust the quality or the accuracy of what they're telling me. So this situation, everyone then goes, well, what do you do? The reality is, if you can't find the paper trail, if you can't find out whether it was lawfully established without an approval under the document that was in play at the time, then you basically need to apply for the use afresh, start over. So I've got this exact scenario at the moment, a property in Nogra. Client came to me, we basically did the research through the history records, we actually found a paper trail, but that paper trail only included some basically decision notices, a couple of conditions, there was no plans at all. And so we looked at it and we're like, okay, well, we can tell that it was approved as, like, I can't remember what the terms are, but let's for argument's sake, say special commercial delta. So we could see it's special commercial delta, but I don't have anyone I can reach out to under the current planning and within my network who can tell me what delta converts to in terms of modern terms. Like, is it shop? Is it office? Is it hairdresser within a shop? Like, what is it here? So I sort of said to the client, we can keep digging, but it's kind of like a how long's a piece of string kind of scenario. Like, I could keep spending money and time on this and it may come up trumps. Like, I may come up with absolutely nothing, a dead end at the end of it. So what I kind of have to recommend begrudgingly is that you just lodge a new application for a shop or whatever use we want under the current planning scheme. Yes, it costs money, like 10 to 15 grand plus, whatever time, we're talking like 5 months in council, whatever it's going to be, but at least you have that known quantity. And in a scenario or situation like this where they're looking to sell the property and need that factual backing to be able to promote the property, or when they're, for whatever reason, they need that definitive, yes, this is approved answer, unfortunately, that is our only option. So let's wrap this up. Moral of the story, point I want to get across here today is when it comes to proving that existing commercial uses or existing dual occupancies in houses, those historical sort of uses are legit, or when it comes to, more importantly, going forward, proving that the rectification work you're doing for flood affected properties was lawfully created or established in the first instance, it's not as simple as just picking up the phone and having a chat to council. The reality is they probably won't have the records or the detailed information to be able to confirm it. And then you're going to come to us and we're going to say, okay, well, we can go back through the planning schemes, but the chance of us actually getting that conclusive answer is slim. So you're probably going to be faced with a situation where you just have to make it comply with modern rules, which is a whole different can of worms. Maybe I'll talk about in that next week's video. Anyway, that covers off everything I want to talk about today. As I always say, until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number two, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all. Bye.